Hi, I'm Russell Sturgis, the author of The Spiritual Roots of the Tarot. This is the second reading from my book taken from Chapter 1. The subtitle of my book is entitled The Cathar Code, Hidden in the Cards. Today I'm going to share an excerpt from my book that explains my rationale for how I see the Cathar being connected to the Marseille Tarot. As previously suggested, the purpose of these mysteries being portrayed in picture form was to convey the formula for escaping the world of the evil god and the journey that one had to undertake to return to the kingdom of the good god. This was pure dualism theology, which was the domain of the Cathar priests, the perfecti. Whether they remain hidden in watermarks or were depicted in forms that were more like portable stained glass windows, like manuscripts, it can be assumed that a formula for finding the world of the good God was already prescribed and may have been for hundreds of years. It is also highly probable that this formula included the Holy Grail and was the sacred template for salvation for which the Cathar were the custodians. Given what is known of the Cathar theology, the template depicted in these portable stained glass windows would have to fit certain parameters. First and foremost, it would have to depict the world of the evil god and how it was possible for a person to return to the world of the good god. Because the good god was not associated with the earth in its material world, there is a good chance that the good god would not even be depicted. It would have to be aligned with the teachings of the Sermon on the Mount, as those scriptures were fundamental to their religion. This focus on the Sermon on the Mount was emphasised in the Consolamentum, their sacred sacrament, with the Lord's Prayer being one of its key components. A sequence of scriptures in the Sermon on the Mount were called the Beatitudes, being given that label in the late 4th century. As will be explained later, being intrinsic to the teachings of the primitive church, these would also play a prominent part of the perfecti prescription for developing a love-centered consciousness, which was necessary to qualify to enter the kingdom of heaven. Given their importance, it would be expected that the Beatitudes be included in the template, since reincarnation was an important part of the Cathar theology. There would also have to be some sort of depiction of reincarnation. The importance of Sophia as the divine feminine would also be symbolically depicted. One would expect that the context of the symbolism used in the images reflected the cultural and socio-political currency of the time. Since the picture paints 1,000 words, significant current events that the majority of people would be familiar with would make it easier to depict more complex messages. The context of the events adds a richness to the image's ability to deliver the right message. One could also assume that themes depicted in popular mediums of art and used in churches at the time might be recycled where appropriate, since they would convey a message already understood by the general populace. Given that these were the sacred Grail mysteries, you would also expect that there would have to be a hidden key for gaining access to that knowledge. Thought fossils. The trumps of the Marseille Tarot tick all of the boxes. It is plausible that these thought fossils are the preserved mystery teachings of the Cathar, what they went to so much trouble to preserve at Montsegur. What was thought to have vanished as a result of the Albigensian Crusade and the Inquisition may have actually managed to survive. There are holes in the trail of conclusive evidence to show how these mystery teachings relocated from the south of France to Lombardy in the 13th century, then to Paris in the 15th century. From there, they re-emerged in the 17th century as a standard canon, leaving a gap of 150 years with no clear explanation for how this canon of the Marseille Tarot was finally agreed upon, although, as Bailey suggests, they may have gone underground. The lack of historical evidence, although a handicap in one regard, is compensated for in another. The evidence which justifies the authenticity of its heritage is in the real-life application of the formula. Since the key for unlocking the deep mysteries of the Cathar Code was discovered in 2007, hundreds of lives have been beneficially impacted through the application of what had previously been hidden knowledge. These obscure images that became known as the Marseille Tarot have finally given up their long-held mystery, and through the successful application of the formula contained therein, it can be argued that they are in fact the preserved deep mysteries of the Cathar Perfecti. The Grail mysteries that were embedded into this code that were thought only to be a myth did exist and were cleverly hidden in plain sight. That said, it's highly unlikely that the Cathar produced any form of tarot cards. Cards in general weren't introduced into Italy and France until later in the 14th century. This is after the death of the last known Perfecti in Italy. It's worth noting that the popularity of playing cards was meteoric. It was only a matter of a year at most, and the church was universally condemning their use. Dice had long been used for games of chance and gambling, and the introduction of cards fitted in perfectly. Besides being used for games, they were also treated like miniature paintings, where they were easily carried and could be used to inspire times of quiet reflection. Of course, it didn't take too long for bawdy images to be put onto the cards, adding to their already perceived evil purposes. Dice, besides being used for gambling, had found another more acceptable application though. In the 10th century, the Bishop of Cambria, Wybold, invented a dice game that was later called Ludus Regularis Clericalis, which roughly translated means a game for monks or priests. The idea was that when 3 dice were thrown, they could result in 56 combinations which were attributed a virtue. This turned a game of vice into one of inspiration and contemplation. If cards on their arrival in Europe were so quickly applied to gaming, there is every reason to believe that they may have had a more virtuous application as early as the 15th century. This could well be the precursor to the cards being given an esoteric meaning. The idea of fortune telling was first documented in a book written by Italian author Sigismondo Fanti, Trionfo di Fortuna, written in the early 16th century. Thanks for taking time to check out my videos. Please go to www.westernmindfulness.com.au to check out the blog series that I'm doing on my book.